So good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the launch episode of the Cloud Counsel, brought to you by Nutanix. So you don't need to hear me say this, but businesses are facing unprecedented challenges and the greatest level of uncertainty in more than a generation. So we've put together the Cloud Counsel to bring together expert voices from across the cloud and IT industries to answer your questions and to try and bring you some useful, actionable insights to help you to respond to this disruption and to business change. So we'll be coming to you every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. GMT, in which we'll assemble a panel of C-suite leaders, industry experts, and commentators to help answer your questions and provide the best advice on responding to disruption and business change. If you've got any questions, you can email us whilst we're on this broadcast, and that's at advice@thecloudcounsel.com. Do our very best to answer your questions on this show or at the next one. Ultimately, we're here to provide a service to IT industry to help you with some of your burning questions as we all go through this challenging time. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Julie Pierce, Director of Operations, Data and Digital at the Food Standards Agency, and also by Mark Chillingworth, CIO and CTO Community Editor. And a very good afternoon to both of you.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. A little bit of background on our guests. Julie has had an illustrious career in IT leadership and consultancy. Prior to her role at the FSA, she was CIO at DEFRA. She is an ambassador for women in STEM and always looking to support female colleagues in their IT careers. And latterly was voted number 5 in the CIO 100 last year. Mark, as I said, is a community editor. He writes for a number of publications, including the FT, Diginomica, Hot Topics, and IGG Connect. He launched in 2015 the Horizon CIO Network to bring together a community of CIOs and CTOs at various events, which latterly has become the Horizon CIO Podcast, the only UK quality podcast for CIOs and CTOs. So a very warm welcome again to you both. And as you can gather by their short CVs here, Julie and Mark, what they don't know isn't worth knowing. Now, as everybody is, we're all working from home today, so we're coming to you live from home. So if you get any BBC News style children interruptions, please bear with us. So let me start the conversation with a question to Julie. Julie, in case there are those on the line who don't know what the Food Standards Agency is and think perhaps maybe you're a restaurant critic, please educate us and tell us what FSA is and tell us about your work and your role, please.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, I am a restaurant critic in my spare time, but also the Food Standards Agency, we are the regulator for ensuring that the food in the UK is safe to eat and it is what it says it is. So it is authentic, and as well as ensuring it's safe, we're also looking for any crime out there. So we do not serve Scotland, but we serve the rest of the UK.
Okay, thank you. And specifically your role, Julie, give us a little bit of insight as to what you're responsible for, and then we'll come on to how you're managing this time.
Okay, so yes, you dwelt on my IT and digital credentials, but my title is actually Director of Openness, Data and Digital. And being open and transparent is very important to us as an organisation and how we operate on behalf of the consumer. I'm also the Director of Science and the Director for Wales. So it's a very broad portfolio, I think.
Yes, and forgive me if I missed the openness, and I was going to ask you what that meant, but you've told us now, so thank you. So I guess certainly on my mind, I'm sure everybody's minds, in terms of what we're trying to do, which is bring insight and guidance and best practice. Give us a little bit of an insight into, how it's been for you since the pandemic, what you've had to do to change your working patterns, what you've had to do as a business personally, and I guess how you see that going forward.
So for us, we're treating the pandemic as a major incident. It's having a huge impact on what the agency does day to day. We are both looking out across the food system, trying to see whether there are changes in risk in relation to the food, seeing whether food supply is being disrupted and maybe alternative sources of food might increase the risk. Food businesses are asking for relaxation in certain regulations, possibly the rules around food is labelled. To do that, we have to go through a really fast process of working out whether or not it's legal, working out what we think the risk might be, and whether we could relax any regulation. So the sort of thing we may take, I don't know, 12 months to do, we're doing in a matter of days. So the whole organisation is operating at fever pitch. Also, part of our function is to provide the meat hygiene inspectors and vets, those people that stand in abattoirs and just making sure that the meat is produced safely. So they're under pressure. They're having to have 2 meters social distancing, questions whether they should have PPE. So we've got an operational workforce out there as well that we need to look after.
Okay, I understand. So you've got this tricky balance of obviously wanting, I suppose, to support, your network of food providers clearly to make sure everybody remains fed, but also trying to keep, everybody safe in terms of that supply chain. So how are you balancing, as you say, relaxing, but also making sure you're kind of meeting your high standards that you always have?
Um, well, the standards are there for safety. We're not responsible for worrying about quality of the food you eat. It's to try to ensure that it is as safe as it needs to be. And what we're doing at the moment, I think any changes we make, we are undertaking risk assessments, whether they involve the scientists or involve more of my data team to try and see what's going on and see whether we can see shifts in what's going on out there in the wider world. We just look across all the different data sources and are trying to make those judgments. There's not a single way of coming up with the answer. It depends on a case by case basis what we have to do. I think we're also remember, the food system is a global food system. Half the food we eat is imported. So we need to be mindful of looking out across the global food system and worrying about what might be coming to our shores. And so to do that, we reach out to our global counterparts, the other food regulators across the world, and understand what they're seeing, what they're worrying about, and then whether we can predict what might happen in the UK.
Mhm. Got it. Fascinating. Well, I don't envy you having to work at this pace, as well as having a very disrupted workforce. So, on that, how are you balancing, as you say, having probably a very increased workload on a very disrupted workforce, and how are you, I guess, two things: keeping everybody engaged and supported, morale high, at the same time as probably asking them to do a lot more than perhaps business as usual.
Well, I think we could see this coming, and on one level, it's an incident, so we know how to manage incidents, and so we
Mhm.
geared up into started off just running it as a normal incident, and then it just grew to a major incident and just became an order of magnitude bigger than anything we've ever run before. Um, as that was happening, and again, everyone else is in the same boat here. As that was happening, we're facing the lockdown, and so then had to say to all of our people to go home, except for those who have to still stand in the abattoirs every single day, watching the carcasses go by. But everybody who's trying to get their head around managing the incident, working out whether they've got a new job or not, whether they're going to the briefing cell or whether they're now on call or a rota, we're doing all of that and saying to them, and take your laptop home and don't come back. So we were doing that at exactly the same time. But I'm so amazed and impressed that they did log on the next morning. They're all there, and everybody is working with their laptop, with their smartphone, and so far it's all been working.
Right. Well, fingers crossed it stays that way, and well done for managing the disruption. Maybe we'll come back to your incident response in terms of, I'm sure a lot of people listening would like to hear some advice on how you do that, and if you've got a specific process you've invoked there. Let me just bring in Mark here. Mark, you may have some additional questions here, but one for you, just kind of looking broader across other industries. We've heard a little bit about the FSA impact and how they've dealt with it. What are you seeing out there, and any similar themes, patterns, and best practices you can share with the audience here?
Yeah, much as Julie's just expressed, amazing how quickly Julie's peers have responded and built virtual organizations, and I think spread out across the country. I was talking to 2 CIOs from universities. Those are now universities in effect without campus, and they're carrying on business as usual, teaching as usual, you might say. But every industry, there have been challenges, particularly around technology supply chain. There were organizations who were perhaps building up to this sort of the sort of procedures that Julie's embedded and allowing the organization to travel and work freely. And they've been caught a little bit, and so is the technology industry to a degree, in that there were shortages of everything from webcams and devices and printers and that has been a challenge. But actually, I think the technology industry, as well as the technology leadership industry in the end user community, should pat itself on the back. The response has been pretty overwhelming. I think I'm not hearing any stories of like, oh, I've been let down. I think that everyone has pulled together and delivered some amazing results in something that was, we've never had an incident like this before that has required technology leaders and technology suppliers to ramp up so quickly.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it has been overwhelming for us and a lot of the suppliers out there. So let me just cover a topic, Julie, you raised earlier. Obviously, you in your role and in the organization, you do a lot with data. You use that, as you said, to inform your insight from global networks and what you kind of analyze to assess risk, etc. How have you? I guess, how has that shifted as you've now moved to a more remote workforce where you're now potentially accessing that data remotely and to protect the integrity of that data? Are you seeing a shift there, and are there kind of activities in place to try and ensure that data remains as safe as it is when you're not remote working?
The short answer to that is no, because this is how we designed how we would be working in the future. So I do think over the last 2 years we've had 2 years to get this implemented, to get it right. That includes all of the security policies, processes, design, and implementation. And I think that 2 years of just being able to do it right and to get it embedded has been invaluable. So I think we've been just at the front of the curve as it all hit. So therefore, the answer is: are we having to do anything different? No, we're not. So we've been running with an organisation where people can choose where they work. they can choose to work at home, be a home worker. They can choose to work in any office. They can choose to do a combination of those. So all this is done is sort of like shift the whole of the workforce into working at home. So I don't think there's anything that's causing me a huge amount of concern in the way that we're using the data. Everything has been designed to work in this way.
Got it. Got it. And so let's just go back to your, the incident response team that, as you said, you got, some maybe early foresight and you had a process in place to invoke. As much as you're allowed to share, perhaps give us a bit of insight, and especially if you've got some best practices that you could recommend that people look to improve incident response for these sorts of scenarios. And then maybe after that, yes, particularly in the context of the Food Network, because touching everybody's lives right now. How do you see, the future playing out? And any insight you've got into that, I think, would be very useful for the audience.
Wow, I'm not sure whether I have any great insights, but if we come back to the here and now incidents, so part of our role is to manage incidents as and when they occur. So an incident for us would be something like horse meat, or more recently it was the fipronil in eggs, something like that, normally in just one type of food that causes great concern. We see those things happening. We have a process that kicks in and everybody knows what they do. We exercise and try and make it as real as possible. So what do? We know what to do. It's all written down, and we exercise, practice. So it's never a surprise, and that includes the whole of the organization, including the support functions. This one, as I said, is just gone into a completely different league. But what's different maybe is not only the scale of what we're doing, how it impacts everybody, other government departments, the whole of business, the whole of the planet. So we're trying to handle that, but we are also trying to do a bit more prediction of what might happen over the next couple of months. So this incident we're sort of tracking as it moves from China into Europe, and then it moves over into North America and India, and we're now looking at it going into Latin America. So what is the impact on the food food supply as it moves across the globe? So trying to sort of get ahead of the incident as it is being played out. We're doing that much more this time. The other thing we're doing, this is more in the science side of things. People are saying, well, will things change? Or will they just revert back to how they were whenever that is going to happen? So we're doing a lot of work sort of in parallel, social media listening to what people are talking about, listening to how people are feeling, how they're viewing the risk. Another thing we're doing is our key piece of advice to avoid foodborne illness is to wash your hands and to disinfect your kitchen work surfaces. So now if people are coming through this pandemic and possibly going forward, if people wash their hands more and keep their work surfaces cleaner, maybe they'll also be safer from Campylobacter, norovirus, and all of those diseases that we spend much of our time dealing with. So for us, coronavirus isn't a foodborne disease, so we're not leading on it, but there could be something good coming out of it if everybody does continue good hygiene practice.
We've all got very good at it in the last few weeks and months. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Julie, you mentioned that data tracking that you're doing. Do you think some of this is also I mean, you're a very data-orientated organization. Do you think that those organizations that have struggled with this slightly as because they're not as data-orientated, and that we will see one of, just as we've seen the move to remote working, we will see an increase in data orientation in organizations to understand how, when things like this either happen or are coming, how they may be able to respond?
Yes, I definitely think that data is key. One of the things I think for a data driven organization, again, is something like this happens and you suddenly the data that you've got and what you can do with the data, because there's no point in just having data, but being able to very quickly set up an intelligence team and to on a daily basis be able to provide that briefing up to the top of the office. Again, I don't need to do any hard sell as to why I need investment in data when I've got that just being fed to them day by day by day. The case is made for me. Also, when I'm listening to some of the conversations across the whole of the food sector, because they do come together on every other day to talk about what's going on and what the risks actually are, you do start to feel that some are just better at this, some have the data and they just not only have the data, but they have the agility to access it and then operate on it. A lot of what goes on in the food system is quite manual, and quite a lot of it is driven by automated algorithms. But if the algorithm is sending the food to the wrong place, it keeps sending it to the wrong place. So can you divert product that's going to restaurants and can you send it to retail? Well, sounds easy, but it's not that easy when the whole of the system is sort of been very tightly geared around one model. So I think those that are truly flexible will come out well in this. The other thing that we're seeing, and I'm sure all of you as consumers are also seeing the manifestation of new business models, people operating in different ways. They can't sell their food to the usual market, so they're trying to sell it direct. Some stores are doing delivery when they never did before. New people with new ideas to collaborate coming into the sector. So that's, I think, going to be a big change. But so many of those, as we've said in many times, are digital-based organizations. They are driven by data, and it's that allows them to come into this sector really, really fast and take up the slack. So I think we'll see more of that coming through as we come out of the pandemic itself.
Got it. Fascinating. Now I'm going to take a quick shift in probably in our last 5 minutes here, but since we are called the Cloud Council, a question about cloud, and this doesn't necessarily need to be to you, Julie, it could be Mark, but kind of as part of that agility that you described, Julie, what we're seeing is rapid adoption of public cloud from sectors and companies that perhaps might have been a bit more reticent in the past to do that out of necessity now. Obviously with that comes some challenges around some of the things we talked about before, data integrity and security. Are you seeing that, Julie or Mark, either in the customers you're talking to or within the FSA, and what are you doing to make sure that adoption, is kind of safe and conforming to standards and regulation?
So this was our strategy from 2 years ago, having been in the not enviable position of having lost 2 data centers in the matter of 6 months. One from a fire and another from a flood. That was my incentive to go to the cloud. And as of about 6 months ago now, we are 100% on cloud. We have nothing on premise. And so again, all of that has been established. It's it's working well, and I think we're coming through the other side of some of the pain through to optimization. When we first went on cloud, it certainly wasn't beautiful and it wasn't super efficient. But I think we're going to the next stage now of just making it more and more efficient. But it certainly has absolutely delivered for me. I cannot imagine we could have done this if we had not been on cloud.
Mm. Very
Yeah,
good.
and the only thing I'd add there, I think, optimization. I think Julie hit the nail on the head there, and that was growing as a debate anyway. I think a lot of CIOs and CTOs had really, the price debate wasn't really standing up, but the optimization and organizations hadn't optimized was definitely growing anyway, and this will have absolutely supercharged that. And not wishing to be crass about where we are at the moment, there are correlations with the 2008-2009 financial crisis, I think, where yet again CIOs and CTOs have stepped forward and done a huge amount of work to preserve and enable organizations to carry on and to change. And I think that will progress further after this, when organizations come back to the board table 2 meters apart and discuss the opportunities. And I think, as Julie said, optimization will be one of those discussions.
Yeah, agreed. So let me just ask final one or two questions here. One of the things we're seeing is obviously a lot of customers who need help, whether it's with some of the things we've talked about today or rapid adoption of remote workers, helping them coexist between public-private cloud. There's also this sort of fine balance, I think, we're seeing in the market of helping and being opportunistic. As somebody, Julie, who probably sees a lot of suppliers, vendors engage or try and engage with you, what's the right balance of help and being kind of opportunistic at this time?
I don't think I could call that with 43% help and whatever. I think it's both. I think to be opportunistic, you first have to be able to be close enough to see what the opportunities are. So I think I always value organizations who know what we're about, but I'm always keen when somebody does have an idea, and people have reached out to us and said, what about this? And I can very quickly say no, so that doesn't take a lot of effort. But I personally rather hear about some of these ideas. And yes, it is an opportunity. It is a different way of working. Lots of things are being turned on their heads. So again, things that might not have flown, 3 or 4 months ago, suddenly now people are interested. So it's much easier to get in to talk to people about remote working in different ways, using data. Suddenly those are easy conversations to be had, whereas 3 months ago someone might have sort of glazed over and said no thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's good feedback. So look, final question, as we look to close here. You've talked a lot about how you're using data for better insight, both inside your own organization and outside. You've also talked about getting ahead of things and early adoption of cloud. If you could give two or so bits of advice to the viewers here, to start on a data science project and to start on a cloud adoption project, if that's easy enough to do in a minute, what would you say would be a good place to start?
Well, certainly with our data science project, that was hard. That was a hard sell at the beginning, and I was walking around trying to persuade somebody that this was a good idea. The approach we did take was to find somebody with a business problem. So I'm having to be really opportunistic there with my own users, scouring the corridors to find somebody who's got a problem and they didn't even realize they had one, but and then dragging them away in a room and trying to show how data science can solve their problem. Again, being opportunistic, we then had EU exit, and suddenly people are worried about what the state of imports was going to be. So being quick to pick up on that problem and coming up with something of value that people recognized quickly in a matter of weeks. And then you've got them eating out of your hand, because once you've got them once, then they'll come back again and again. So that's been my advice for data science projects. Start small, be opportunistic, be agile.
Yeah, show some quick wins and then build. Yeah,
and then build. Absolutely. Certainly do not do it the other way around and disappear and spend huge amounts of money over a year and build a great big thing that nobody wants. Then cloud. I think if you asked me 2 years ago, it was hard. We were sitting down writing business cases, estimating costs and savings, and doing all of that sort of stuff. Again, I don't think it's going to be hard anymore. This situation just makes the case for you. You can show how well your organization's operating, and you can show and contrast with how others who've done it have operated, and how not only was it easy to make it happen. And one of the observations I would make for my team, it wasn't just the first step and their operation in the first week and they managed to cope. It's now that they are becoming really sophisticated users. They use Teams, they move from Teams to Zoom to Skype. And those are all of the users. They're not just the IT savvy ones. That's everybody is starting to operate in that way. And I'm just really gratified to see them working like that and to come up with all of the tips and techniques themselves. We're not training them anymore. They're just doing all of that themselves. So it's not just a single step. It's just watching your organization then evolve.
Got it. Self-learning. Brilliant. Yeah. Well, Julie, I think that is a great place to end, and Mark as well. So let me start by saying, or finish by saying, thank you both very, very much indeed for joining us at a particularly busy time, and for sharing your insights. Julie, thank you for keeping us all safe. And thank you to you, all the viewers, for joining us today. As I said at the beginning, we will be coming to you twice a week live, with some other exciting guests, starting with next Tuesday, 4 p.m, when we'll be joined by John Cosson, who's the head of IT and Chief Information Security Officer for Investment and Wealth Management Advisors JM Fin, along with Nutanix founder, chairman and CEO Dheeraj Pandey, in which we'll be covering advice on driving successful remote business operations. I'm afraid we've timed out for answering any questions that came through the wire here, but if you have asked any questions, we will cover them on the next Counsel on Tuesday. And a reminder, the email address is advice@thecloudcounsel.com, and we will answer them next Tuesday. Finally, a write-up of today's show detailing some of the actionable insights that Julie and Mark have shared, along with an on-demand recording of this episode, will be available at nutanix.com/cxo/cloud-counsel. And with that, thank you very much indeed, all of you, for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next time.